Hi, my name is Javier Martinez, and the reason for this video today is because I'm going to try to go ahead and explain the importance of both state and local governments and what it does to its citizens. So basically, even though both the state and the local governments are focused in making sure or passing legislation that will affect us either in our daily lives, noticeably or unnoticeably. So in this case, we're going to start off with a few scenarios. So in the first scenario, you have the town of Smallburg, Missouri, um, which is a small city that is located to a much larger city, which is Mid City. Now, recently, Mid City's school funding has been cut, and so Smallburg's students are actually attending Mid City's schools. So, cutting funding is eventually, well, it's definitely going to affect both of them. Now, Smallburg has decided to go ahead and build another school for its local students. And since it does have a growing population, and in order to pay for the new state of the art building, the funding will come from a new tax fund or a new education tax. So this is primarily a local issue because schools are local, so the state is not really concerned within the schools in each city or the funding for it for that matter. So yes, this will be a local issue. Now, as far as who will benefit from this policy, I think that students on both Mid City and also Smallburg students will benefit from this policy due to the fact that the they won't have, or Mid City's school system won't have high costs due to them having Smallburg students, and Smallburg students will definitely benefit because now they will have their own building in their own hometown where they can get the education that they need. Um, Now, the people who are going to be negatively impacted by this are obviously going to be the taxpayers. The taxpayers are from Smallburg are going to have to pay this education fee or tax fee, but it is going to benefit in the long run. Whether it's their local economy or the growing population, you do really benefit from local schools. Now, the policy does seem reasonable due to the fact that Smallburg has a growing population, which is only going to get bigger, and so they'll eventually need a proper school system. Um, so, yeah, implementing a new education tax for a new school is reasonable. Now, the impacts of this policy change that are going to affect its citizens specifically is going to be affecting Smallburg and also mid cities. Um, like I said, due to the fact that they won't have mid city won't have as much students, and the taxpayers in Smallburg are going to have to give up some more money for that building. Now, even though some of the Smallburg's residents claim that they do not have children, or maybe their children have already graduated from the public school system. Um, Now let's moving on to Frost City, Minnesota. They just went through the snowiest winter in history. Snowfall reached record highs, and this has caused schools to be canceled and many workers to miss work. Now, the major has decided to rearrange the municipal budget to allow commissioning of 20 additional city plows and 30 more plow drivers to clear the city streets during the aftermath of snowstorms. Now, they're taking these funds away from the budget to renovate the playgrounds in the city. So, um, therefore, this would be a local policy issue due to the fact that the major is the one allocating these funds. And so, obviously, a major controls the city, so it is a city funding issue. Now, the people who are going to benefit from this are going to be, um, school. Some of the students might be happy that the schools are shut down during these winter snowstorms, but students are going to be able to get their education, so they'll benefit from that. And also, they, um, people who have regular 9 to 5 jobs or just a job in general are going to be able to work during those close downs. Now, the people who stand negatively impacted by this are going to be the lower income people who tend to visit the local playgrounds since they're not going to be renovated, and also kids themselves. A lot of kids go to these playgrounds just to have fun, just basically be a kid. So those are the people who are going to be negatively impacted by the allocation of the budget. Now, does the policy seem reasonable to some point? Yes, it does seem reasonable due to the fact that people are not getting work done during these weeks of heavy snowstorm, and also students aren't getting their education. So it does seem reasonable to go ahead and try to fix that, to get the clothes back up, or I'm sorry, the roads back up. And so yeah, that's the reason why it does seem reasonable. It doesn't seem reasonable in the fact that they're removing some of the funding from the local playgrounds, and that might lead it to leave these playgrounds in hazardous conditions and maybe injuries and lawsuits. Now, the impacts that this is going to have specifically on its citizens is that it will allow their daily lives to be uninterrupted due to some snow, but at the same time, it can affect the kids since the playgrounds can be deemed unsafe since they are old and worn out. Now, moving up to the next scenario, we have to meet the challenging rising cost of living in towns and cities throughout the state. Rural Lighting has decided to raise the minimum wage up to $9.60. This is $2 more than the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25. Now, workers and labor unions are obviously happy with this because now they will be raising, or they will have more money to keep up with the high living costs. Now, this would be a local issue, or I'm sorry, a state issue, since the state is the one that decides what what the minimum wage is. It's either the state or the federal. Usually the one which is higher is taken over. So in this case, it's a state issue. Now, like I said, those are the people who will benefit from this, and who will stand negatively impacted somehow is going to be local businesses, because they are now going to have required to increase their wage budget, therefore increasing costs as well. They might be able to reduce costs in some other places, so therefore it might cost them to fire some people, lay off some people, or also to hire less people. So it can definitely affect the economy as well. Now, does the policy seem reasonable? Yes, it does seem reasonable due to the fact that people are struggling just to get by, to make ends meet, and just really to pay rent. So I really do think that this is a reasonable policy. Now, like I said, since its citizens are going to have a higher minimum wage, this has different outcomes that it might have. So if it were to be successful, then obviously those people are going to make the cost of living more affordable. On the other hand, if this were to fail, businesses are going to hire less people, lay off people, and can ultimately have a bad effect on the economy. But for the most part, I do think that this is a positive issue. Now, moving on to the last scenario, New Hampshire Route 101 is a major state highway. It runs east to west to the state and provides usual connection to the beach. Now, recently during the summer months, this area is really heavily trafficked. So the state has decided to go ahead and increase from 2 to 4 lanes, and also increase the limit, the speed limit, to 70 miles per hour as opposed to the 60 they had. This would be both a state and local policy issue, since the budget allocated for these costs are for both levels of government. Now, who will ultimately benefit from this issue is going to be people living in the area. So, not necessarily live in the area, but during the summertime when there's a lot of beachgoers, I think those people will benefit due to there's going to be less traffic, and the people who are going to be negatively impacted or might be the locals who are impacted by the construction when plans are executed. This might be able to cause more traffic and impact the local landscape by changing it. And also, this, in a sense, does seem like a reasonable idea due to the fact that traffic is a problem and therefore increasing lanes and increasing the speed limit does seem like a reasonable idea because it's said that even just to get to the grocery store, it's a hassle. So I do think that this is a reasonable idea or reasoned policy. Um, Now, the citizens that are affected by this policy will be the local citizens and also the towns that are connected to the highway. This will allow citizens to drive through the highway faster due to the changes and make their daily commutes better. This can also lead for more people visiting the beach and increasing the local economy for its citizens. Lastly, the construction project to expand the highway might make traffic worse in some ways during the actual construction or renovation of the highway. Now, the way that a local policy has affected us here where I live, which is Austin, Texas, recently Austin, Texas enacted a paid sick leave. It will require all employers to provide employees with sick leave or sick days, which is, I think, a really good idea. Now, eligible employees can accumulate sick hours. So it's going to be 1 hour for every 30 hours worked and up to 64 hours annually. And for those smaller businesses, they're required to give their employees at least 48 hours if they have 15 or less employees. And for smaller businesses, this isn't going to be effective like rest of the big companies and corporations. So for larger employers, this is going to become effective starting on October 1st. And for the small businesses, it's going to be effective in 2020. So I do think that this is a pretty positive policy that is passed here in Austin due to the fact that this is the only southern city that mandates paid sick leave. So I think this is a plus for their workers. I think that people are going to not have as many medical expenses because what's the point of you missing school, missing work because you're sick? If you're going to get fired anyway, you might be able to accumulate some medical bills while you're sick. So I do really think that this is a positive policy that is passed in my city.